On this next phase of turning a garage bay into a multi-purpose space, we've finished all the drywall and we've painted the walls and the ceiling with 2 or 3 coats of a white paint, as well as painted the walls with a nice soft yellow that will complement the white cabinets that are coming in later. Tim put in the crown molding that will hide the wires on the beam and the ceiling, and we'll begin putting the floors in. It's very nice to have these floors in. We've actually been saving this flooring for quite a while and are happy to have a place to actually use it.
We did the ceilings and spray painted everything. So I went through and sprayed the ceiling a couple times with new white ceiling paint, and I always spray the walls at least once. New drywall, I may do it twice, just because it kind of acts as a primer, keeps it from sucking up all the new paint. We're at the point now where I put up my lights last night, and a ceiling fan, and I left that outlet from the garage. That's the old outlet that ran the garage door opener. I figured we may use that at some point. And I just finished putting down the plastic on the floor because we're putting laminate down. The manufacturer recommends putting plastic down as a vapor barrier. I don't particularly think we would have a problem with that, but I went ahead and did it anyways. It doesn't take too long to put down. So the next step, I'll be putting in the laminate. A couple things to note when we're painting. You can always tell which paint job looks like when you look down it. One thing I learned very new when I started doing stuff like this was when you painted, if you rolled half the wall, this is a 9-foot ceiling, or 8.5 foot. So if you rolled half the wall, you know, from here to here, and then went all the way down, and then went back and did the upper half, you're going to overlap in the middle. And what happens is now you have twice as much paint on this strip down the middle. And then you have to do a second coat, so now you have 4 times, you know, you see that, well, sorry, then you have twice as much paint running down the middle. And if you have any type of gloss or sheen, if you're using the semi-gloss, things like that, it will show a very distinct difference between what's above it and what's below it. So when I roll, you know, I'll trim everything out and I'll go literally from floor to ceiling, and I'll just go down that all the way with full strokes all the way up and down, and that helps to eliminate any of those overlapping areas. I did 3 coats on this wall. This is the old wall and it had some stains. So I actually had to go through and use some kills and go over some of those stained areas. Everything else only got 2 coats. This area, not having any major reflections, things of that nature, you really couldn't see it. If there was an area that needed to have an extra coat, you couldn't tell. Plus, all this is going to be cabinets and shelves on this side, and I did a 3rd coat down all that wall too. Tapped into my supply up there, and it's a little bit of a mess. So I'll take out the little zip cutter and trim all that back before I put the plate on. On this side there's a stud here. On this side I put a piece of 1x behind it. Those are my 2 screws holding the 1x in, and then when my plate vent cover goes on there, it'll have something to screw to, but will also hide those holes. And the vent is only about 3 inches behind the wall. So instead of going through and getting metal and framing everything up, I just foamed it. And I'll go back and cut it out and it'll look nice and neat and perfect. Oh, there's our crown molding. I have not caulked it yet, so it still has some seams. This was something new that I haven't tried before. It's there's a wire chase behind there. Basically, I don't remember all the wires that hung down when we ran our wiring. This was, of course, an existing structure, so we didn't tear everything, you know, tear holes apart or anything. So most of the wiring, my breaker box on the back side of this wall in the garage, most of the wiring comes over, up through the header there, and it comes out in that corner. And so for this light here in the kitchen, it would come over into the ceiling, fished it over to this light, and so forth. So there's wires that run there all the way down. They go into the ceiling there, up, over, and then down, over to catch these 2 outlets. I had to run wires from those switches. One of those switches runs this light. So I had a wire that went up into the wall there, along here, up over into there, down, back, and over to that light. And then there used to be a three-way here that ran the lights in the garage. So it actually is still connected inside there just to complete the circuit. I ran a three-way wire up through here, all the way down there, over, down, and on the other side of that wall is a switch now that runs the three-way for the two-car garage now. I wasn't overly impressed with how this went in. There's an L-shaped bracket that screws to the wall, and then your trim piece just snaps into it, but it only snaps in on the top, not the bottom. And that seems to work okay, but there probably would have been a better method somehow. And then you can see there's that seam there at top. That seam wasn't there until I put this joiner piece in, and it's a little bit bigger, so it pushes your pieces out. So now I have probably 3 feet there that I need to caulk. And the same thing happened over here, but it was even worse. If you can tell, it looks like that piece on the left is cockeyed now instead of sitting straight. That's because of that piece that sits there, that joiner piece. I have enough to do the other side with crown molding, but I thought, well, I guess I can't do it now because my vent's in the way. I thought about running a seamless piece there, and then a seamless piece there, but that ductwork in there was only 10 inches, and so the bottom that's cut in there is really right. It's only a ½ inch from the bottom of that duct, if that, so I couldn't go any lower, and that's definitely going to be in the way of the crown molding if I put up there, so won't be doing that. So I may go back to just running another piece of crown along that beam there that helps hold the second floor up. Let's see what else did we do. Had some concrete caulking patch, and I caulked that seam there. Once I get the floor down up to this door, then that door will come off and it will go over here. I will get a new door for there. That's an interior style door. I'll just take the door off because we're just going to leave it open for now, but that way if this ever becomes a bedroom in the future, we'll have a door that can close. And I'll get some bifold doors for that area in there. Before I get too far into this, I'll go over some of the laminate here. This is a kind of a higher grade DuPont. It's actually rated for bathrooms and kitchens. These are 15.5 inch wide panels, and I measured from wall to wall, and I will have 11.5 panels, which is fine. This is that wall to this first wall. So that was 11.5 panels, and then I add on the kitchen area, and what's going to happen is that will leave me with a 2-inch strip along this corner, which is perfectly fine because again this is going to be cabinets. On this side I can actually go beyond the threshold when this door is out, so I'll have a little 2-inch there, and it'll go in and back out, so I'll have about 8 inches probably total, which is plenty. Here in the closet I'm not too worried about. I can tap a little 2-inch piece down, it won't be an issue. When it wraps around the wall inside the closet, I should almost have a full piece that fits right up into there. So actually the layout works great without having to do anything major. Sometimes what you have to do is slide the whole thing down. So let's say I was going to have 2 inches along this wall, which wouldn't be good. I would take this first course and cut it to where I would have, even amount. So I have maybe 12 inches here, and then end up with maybe 12 inches on this wall. I have to measure it and find out how close I'm going to be on this far wall here. Otherwise, you end up with a little tiny strip here, which is always going to be popping out on you. Or you'll have a little tiny strip along this wall, which will always be popping out on you. So you always want to measure first. You get overexcited, and you get excited finally put the floor down, and you jump in here and you get laying on it, and you spend an hour getting it all the way down here, and then you run into, you have like a 3/4 inch piece there, and that just sucks. So you always got to make sure that you measure first before you start. It'll turn around and bite you in the butt. Okay, I come up to some interesting corners here. So I lined it up. It would stop here. That worked perfectly. We have to make sure though is where my seams are at. So there's actually a seam right there. And that way I can cut two individual pieces, one coming from this direction and one coming from that direction. So if I had a full piece in the middle, let's say from there to there, I have to somehow cut down over and back, which is just more work. I can cut everything with a table saw if my seam is in the middle here somewhere. Cut here, cut there, cut there, cut that all over with a table saw, nice, quick, and easy. So wrapped around to the back side here, and get a light on. So this part a little bit trickier. Again, have to have the seam in the middle, otherwise I'm trying to cut around it. It's just too difficult to do that. You can do it, it's not impossible, but if you don't have to, you don't. So getting around the corner, I had to cut a little 2.5 inch piece there. Went ahead and snapped this all together. And then all I have to do is line these ends up like that. Just hard to do this with one hand. Slide it in. One of my guys used my tool. You see it's all busted up. It's because they used a hammer. Don't use a hammer, use a rubber mallet. This is called a floating floor. The reason is it's supposed to float. Therefore you can't have it binding against any walls. Otherwise it will buckle on you as the temperature changes. It will buckle on you. So you can see I have this gap all around the outside, and the trim will cover that up. And then of course I have a pretty good space under here, because that's where drywall's here, and then your framing is actually in 1/2 inch or 5/8 inch, depending on how deep your drywall is. So my trim will stick out 3/8 to 5/8 of an inch, depending on what I get. You can even go thicker and get 3/4 if you like. It'll sit on top. So as this shifts and moves back and forth with temperature changes, it won't buckle and boom on you. And that's that. So I'll work my way down. I'll get a couple more pieces here. Getting to this side, I may have to do a little bit of finessing in this little corner. But beyond that, I'm going to get up to about right here. I'm going to go ahead and take this door out and get it moved over into that space. And then I can go ahead and finish the flooring piece on that side. Got that door out. I'm on to my last piece. I already put the door on this side, and wanted to note how I put a door in. A lot of it comes back to your framing. I know it's called rough framing, but I still try to make everything 90 degrees. So the stud on this side is 90 degrees. It's straight, square, and good to go. So that's going to keep me from having to really shim anything on this side. I always do that on the hinge side. So when I put my door in, one of these screws comes out, and I put a long screw in there. And then I have those screws. Usually I will take the weather stripping and pull it apart and put my screw right there. And then the weather stripping covers it up. This is a garage door. I'm really not worried about it. That one, I've already screwed this hinge side in. So the next thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and put these screws in. On the other side is where I'll shim it. So I've already placed one shim in here to check my closure. Make sure that's good. I've not screwed it yet. So what you want to have is an even line all the way up. Usually you want it to be about 1/4 inch, maybe down to 1/8 of an inch. But you go too tight, and you may end up hitting your strike plate there. And you go too far, and the strike plate won't latch. On a door, you have on the hand, they have two deals. You have this one here is really the lock part that keeps people from picking it. So if somebody comes in from the other side and they have a screwdriver, they'll push that, but it shouldn't undo this back one because it's separate. Anyways, so next I will go ahead and screw in this screw, and then the top one, the bottom one. See, I'm gonna have to clean my garage after all this because everything that was over here is now shoved over there. Also, when I put the strike plate in, I always use long screws as well. If somebody goes to kick it in, you don't have a deadbolt. There's just an extra line of defense that they would have to really kick it hard to break this piece out when you have, 2.5, 3 inch screws putting it into the wall. I'll come back later once this is all in, and I will foam here. You can see I had foam in there before. Push down on top a little bit, but I'll foam my sides with window and door foam. The difference is that it doesn't push things out. It will expand, but when it hits resistance, it just doesn't expand anymore. Otherwise, if you use like a thick, like what I used for my vent was this stuff, big stuff, big gap and cracks, it will keep expanding and keep pushing and keep pushing, and it will end up pushing this out and bowing it. And when it does that, then your door won't work. You have to cut it all out again. The same thing with windows. If you were to use that in your windows wouldn't shut. It would bow the window to the extent that it wouldn't work anymore. So I'll finish putting that door in and finish putting my pieces in down there, and then I will be done for the day. I'll run by the home store and go ahead and buy some doors for these. So I'll probably put those other 2 doors in tonight. But beyond that, it's pretty well getting close to being ready for her to start putting things in. I gotta do the outlet still. I can do the outlets pretty easy. It's all already wired up, just gotta install them. Clean everything up and be good to go.